You are 31 years old and filing Port Authority logistics forms when the call changes everything. Your desk at the Iranian Ports and Maritime Organization in Bandar Abbas smells of stale coffee and salt air. You have spent 4 years in this office cataloguing tanker manifests, vessel names, deadweight tonnage, cargo classifications, berth assignments. You are good at it. You are invisible at it. That invisibility, it turns out, is precisely why they chose you. The call comes at 8:14 in the morning on an ordinary Tuesday. The voice belongs to a colonel you have met exactly once at a ministry briefing 2 years ago. He does not waste syllables. He tells you that the man who ran the Hormuz Coordination Desk, the classified logistics and intelligence node embedded inside the IRGC Navy's Strategic Command, has suffered a stroke. He tells you that your personnel file has been reviewed. He tells you to be at a building you have never heard of, in a district you rarely visit, by noon. He tells you to bring nothing. You are not a soldier. You are not an intelligence officer. You are a man who knows how to read maritime data the way other men read music, not word by word, but all at once, as a shape, as a texture, as a system with its own logic and its own vulnerabilities. That, it turns out, is rarer than a gun. You arrive at noon. The building has no sign. Inside, a general shakes your hand and does not smile. He shows you a single slide on a screen in a windowless room. It is a satellite image of the strait 18 miles wide at its narrowest point, 2 shipping lanes each 2 miles across, a traffic separation scheme that moves 21% of the world's traded oil every single day. 17 million barrels every day. He points at it the way a butcher points at a joint of meat and says, "This is yours now." He means the data, the analysis, the contingency planning, the traffic models, the threat matrices, the back-channel signals that tell tanker operators when to move and when to wait. He means the relationship with the mine-laying units, the fast boat squadrons, the coastal missile batteries, the underwater drone programs. He means the Chokepoint. You sign 7 documents. None of them have titles. The general shakes your hand again and leaves the room before you do. Within a week, you understand something the general's slide did not tell you. Your real power is not the ability to close the strait. Any competent navy can mine a shipping lane. Your real power is the credible ambiguity about whether you will. The threat that is never quite carried out is worth infinitely more than the action, because the action ends the game while the threat sustains it indefinitely. You are not a weapon. You are a thermostat. You regulate temperature. The Americans know this. The Saudi oil minister knows this. The Japanese government, which imports 87% of its crude through your 18 miles of water, knows this with a particular cold clarity. When Tokyo's foreign minister makes a remark about Iranian sovereignty that your superiors consider insufficiently deferential, it is your desk that models the impact of a 48-hour traffic disruption on Japanese fuel reserves, on yen valuations, on the governing coalition's approval numbers. The model goes upstairs. The remark is walked back within 9 days. You do not celebrate. You write a memo about sustainable pressure gradients and go home. The Americans send a carrier group through every 6 weeks. You watch the data, the AIS transponder signals, the pattern of life analysis from the coastal radar arrays, the intelligence reports from assets you are not supposed to know exist but do. You build a model of their decision cycle. You learn that a carrier group is also a thermostat. They are not there to fight you. They are there to tell you the temperature at which they will. As long as you stay below that temperature, the game continues. You stay below it, deliberately, precisely, with the same focused attention you once applied to tanker manifests. In your second year, an incident tests everything you understand. A Panamanian-flagged tanker owned by a Greek shipping company, chartered by a South Korean refinery, carrying Iraqi crude strikes what the crew reports as a floating obstruction at 2:40 a.m. The engine room floods. The ship sends a distress signal. Within 4 hours, international media is running the story. Within 6, Washington is calling it an Iranian mine strike. Within 8, 3 American destroyers are repositioning in the Gulf of Oman. You did not order that mine. You did not know it was there. What you know, and what you can prove within 14 hours of frantic analysis, is that the obstruction pattern is inconsistent with the IRGC Navy's standard mine typology, that the timing correlates with a known Houthi naval unit operating beyond its normal range, and that the flooding pattern suggests a collision with debris rather than a detonation. You write a 7-page technical assessment, classify it at the highest level, and deliver it to the general at 6 a.m. He reads it in front of you and says nothing for 90 seconds. Then he picks up a phone. The back channel to Oman, who mediates with sufficient discretion that no one has to admit talking, conveys your technical assessment through 3 layers of deniability to a contact in the State Department. The 3 destroyers slow their repositioning. They do not stop, but they slow. The temperature drops 2 degrees. You have just prevented something, though you will never be able to name what, and neither will anyone else. The moral weight of this accumulates. You are aware that the system you serve is not a just one in any simple sense. The oil that passes through your strait funds, governments that abuse their people, funds wars you did not choose, funds the exact American military that periodically reminds you via satellite photography and carrier group positioning that it could end your career and your life simultaneously. You serve a system that also uses the choke point as leverage in ways that harm the civilians of third countries who have no voice in any of it. The factory worker in Guangdong who pays more for everything when oil spikes. The Indian farmer whose fertilizer costs jump when shipping insurance rates triple. You think about this sometimes in the hours before dawn when the data streams are quiet and there is nothing to analyze. You do not resolve it. You file it the way you once filed manifests, and you continue. By your 4th year, you have developed what you think of as a grammar of pressure, a set of syntactic rules for how incidents, signals, vessel detentions, and military exercises combine into sentences that the other players can read. A British-flagged tanker detained under one government sent a sentence. A series of GPS spoofing incidents sent another. You did not author all of them, but you learn to read them, and you learn to edit the ones that go too far, the ones whose grammar, in the geopolitical language of the Strait, says something the speaker does not intend, or says something so clearly threatening that it triggers a response the speaker cannot absorb. The hardest conversation of your career happens in year 5, in a conference room with 4 generals, a deputy foreign minister, and a man whose institutional affiliation is never stated. They are discussing the closure option in terms that are no longer theoretical. A fresh round of sanctions has cut oil export revenues by 31%. The domestic pressure on the leadership is significant. The argument being made is that a controlled disruption 72 hours, mining the outer approach channel, not the lane itself, would demonstrate capability and resolve without triggering a full military response because the Americans cannot respond kinetically to a demonstration that leaves the lane technically open. You know this argument is wrong. Not morally wrong, though it may be that too, but technically wrong. You have run the model. A 72-hour disruption at current market tightness would spike Brent crude by $38 to $52 a barrel within 18 hours. Japanese and Korean strategic reserves would begin drawdown protocols. The American president, facing a midterm election 11 weeks away, would face irresistible domestic pressure to respond visibly. The escalation pathway from a controlled demonstration to an uncontrolled exchange has a median duration, in your model, of 9 days. You say all of this. You say it clearly, with numbers, with the model projections on a screen, with footnotes. The man without an institutional affiliation asks you a question that is not really a question. What if the Americans don't respond because we make clear we will escalate if they do? You tell him that this is the logic that every military planner in every conflict since 1914 has used to justify the first move, and that the historical strike rate for that logic is catastrophic. There is a silence in the room that is not comfortable. The Deputy Foreign Minister says that the political situation may not allow for the patient approach. You say that the political situation may not survive the impatient approach. The meeting ends without a decision. You take that as a victory. 3 weeks later, the closure option is shelved. You are not told why. A negotiating track opens in Muscat that was not open before. You allow yourself, alone in your office at 11 at night, to feel something close to relief. In your 6th year, something shifts in the international architecture around you. The Americans begin a partial strategic withdrawal from the region, not a full retreat, but a rebalancing toward Asia, a recalibration of where the carrier groups spend their time. The Saudis, reading this correctly, begin their own hedge. A quiet diplomatic overture to Beijing, which absorbs more than half of Gulf crude exports and has for the first time sent a naval vessel to the Gulf on a joint exercise. The Chinese are at your choke point now, not as an adversary, but as a stakeholder, which is a different kind of complexity entirely. A stakeholder does not want you to close the strait. A stakeholder also does not want the Americans to be the only ones who can guarantee it stays open. You begin a new file, you label it triangulation. The triangulation is delicate in ways that reward patience and punish improvisation. Beijing wants the strait open, which aligns with your institutional interest in maintaining the leverage value of the threat rather than executing on it. But Beijing also wants to demonstrate to Riyadh and to the 6 other Gulf states that export through your water, that it can provide security guarantees that do not require prostrating themselves before Washington. This means it needs to be seen doing something visible in the strait, something that looks like a security contribution, without actually displacing the Americans or provoking them into into a confrontation that collapses the whole architecture. You are modeling a situation in which three great powers, two regional powers, and a rotating cast of non-state actors are all simultaneously trying to use the same 18 miles of water to prove different things to different audiences. You begin to see the strait not as a geographic feature but as a text one that every actor is reading in their own language and writing in at the same time, and that no one fully controls, and that will continue to be written regardless of what any individual player does. This does not make you feel powerless, it makes you feel necessary, which is perhaps a more complicated feeling. You are 37 now, you have been at this desk for 6 years, you have read in that time something close to 1 million data points, and you have shaped, in ways you can trace and in ways you cannot, the pattern of events at one of the most consequential geographic features on Earth. You have prevented incidents you can identify and incidents you will never know about. You have made compromises that kept a larger system stable, some of which you are proud of, and some of which will travel with you in the way that only regret knows how to travel quietly, without announcement, arriving always at the wrong moment. The phone on your desk blinks with an encrypted message. It is from an asset you do not officially have access to, relayed through a channel that officially does not exist, concerning a vessel movement that should not be happening at this hour in these coordinates. You read it twice, you pull up the traffic model, you begin typing. Outside, somewhere beyond your window and across 60 kilometers of desert and coastal highway, the water of the strait is dark and unremarkable, carrying its impossible weight of petroleum and geopolitical meaning toward the open ocean, as it has done every hour of every day since the first tanker transited these waters more than a century ago. It will continue whether or not you solve the problem currently blinking on your screen, but you are the one at the desk, so you solve the problem.